The ICU lights flickered in a sterile rhythm, casting shadows over the rows of tense faces. Outside, a storm raged, rain pelting the hospital windows, but inside, the storm was far more personal, far more desperate. In the corner of the room lay a man who had once commanded the fiercest warriors, a man whose very presence inspired fear and respect in equal measure. Admiral Thomas "Ironhawk" Hayes, a Navy SEAL legend, was dying, and no doctor, no nurse, no miracle could reach him. His heart had begun to falter, his body shutting down after a covert mission had gone catastrophically wrong. All hope seemed lost. Machines beeped, monitors flashed, and yet none of the experienced medical staff could break through the wall of pain and fear that enveloped the dying admiral. It was in this moment, when despair threatened to consume the entire room, that a young nurse named Grace Matthews entered. Fresh from nursing school, Grace was not yet hardened by the grim realities of life-and-death scenarios. She had grown up in small-town Ohio, raised with a deep sense of faith and compassion, always believing that one person's courage could ignite change even in the darkest hour. That day, Grace felt something she could not explain, a pull, a sense that she was meant to be here, in this room, for this very man. Before she touched a single monitor, before she adjusted a single four-line, Grace closed her eyes and whispered a quiet prayer. She had studied Navy codes, memorized call signs as part of her personal interest in military history. Her eyes opened, and without a single word spoken aloud, she called out, "Ironhawk." The room went still. Nurses glanced at each other, doctors furrowed their brows, and even the seasoned trauma team paused. How could a new nurse, barely a month into the ICU, know the Admiral's call sign? There was a tense disbelief in the air, a mixture of hope and incredulity. Grace approached the bed, her hands trembling slightly, not with fear, but with a reverence that seemed to radiate calm into the room. She didn't need charts, she didn't need authorization. She simply whispered the Admiral's call sign again, softly, persistently, as if the words themselves could reach into his soul. If you believe in the power of kindness, the miracle of second chances, and the strength of one determined heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel right now. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Admiral Hayes's fingers twitched. His eyelids fluttered. The monitors, once alarming in their red flashes, seemed to respond to something intangible, a resonance of trust and recognition. Grace kept calling his name, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of tension surrounding her. She recalled reading about how SEALs respond to familiar codes, how identity and camaraderie could sometimes pierce the fog of trauma. She held his hand, the rough skin of a lifetime at sea pressed against her own, fragile in comparison. She whispered every reassuring word she could muster, reminding him, in the simplest terms, that he was not alone. Minutes stretched into hours. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, the patter of rain echoing against the high ceilings as if nature itself held its breath. Doctors tried to intervene, to follow protocols, but Grace's intuition led her in a different direction. She spoke to him not as a patient, but as a warrior, acknowledging the battles he had fought, the sacrifices he had made. She told him that his team still needed him, that his country still remembered him, and that it was not yet time to let go. The tension in the room was electric. Every nurse and doctor could feel the shift, that invisible thread of connection, the raw, fragile link between faith, courage, and survival. And then it happened, a deep, ragged breath. Admiral Hayes's eyes opened, revealing a flicker of recognition, a spark that had been absent for hours. His lips moved, forming words no one could hear, but Grace understood. She smiled through tears, squeezing his hand, whispering, "I'm here. You're not alone." The weeks that followed were a painstaking journey of recovery. Grace stayed by his side, guiding him through the slow process of regaining strength. The Admiral, who had once been the embodiment of strength and command, now relied on her gentle touch, her unwavering determination. He would later admit, in quiet moments that no one else would overhear, that it was her voice, that one call sign, that had anchored him when all else seemed lost. It was a reminder that even the mightiest warriors sometimes need someone to recognize them, to call them home from the edge of despair. Throughout this time, the hospital staff witnessed a transformation, not just in Admiral Hayes, but in Grace herself. She had grown into her role with a maturity and confidence that could not be taught in any classroom. She had discovered the depth of her own courage, the power of empathy, and the profound truth that sometimes, healing begins with recognition, with acknowledgement of the human heart beneath the uniform. The story of that day spread quietly through the hospital. Nurses and doctors shared whispers in break rooms, recounting how a new nurse, a young woman with more faith than experience, had reached a man who seemed unreachable. Families of patients began to ask for her by name. And somewhere in the world of military legend, the name Grace Matthews became known as the nurse who understood that sometimes, it is not the medicine or the machines that save a life, it is the human connection, the knowledge that someone truly sees you. Months later, Admiral Hayes walked through the hospital corridors on his own strength, leaning on a cane, his eyes bright with gratitude. He sought out Grace, found her in the ICU, and for the first time since that near-fatal night, allowed himself to smile without reservation. There was no ceremony, no grand gesture, just a simple acknowledgement between two people whose paths had crossed at the most critical moment. It was a reminder that life could be saved by more than skill, it could be saved by love, by faith, by remembering the humanity in each other. Grace never sought recognition for what she had done. She returned to her work quietly, helping patients, guiding families, holding hands in moments of fear, always carrying with her the memory of the day she saved a hero. She had learned that the weight of responsibility could be lightened by courage and compassion, and that sometimes, a single voice calling out with understanding could pierce through the darkest moments of despair. The storm outside finally cleared, leaving sunlight to spill through the hospital windows, illuminating the room with warmth and hope. For those who had witnessed the miracle, it was a moment of profound reflection. Even the most disciplined, battle-hardened warriors were not immune to vulnerability. And sometimes, salvation comes not from strategy or training, but from the quiet, steadfast presence of someone who knows your name and calls it when you are on the brink of surrender. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the importance of seeing one another and standing together in moments of need, please engage with this video, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Every interaction helps spread the message that courage, compassion, and kindness are never wasted, that they ripple through lives in ways we often cannot measure. Before you go, take a moment to comment below with the person who has ever called your name at a time you needed it most. Your story could inspire someone else to believe in the power of one compassionate voice. Because of grace, because of faith, because of the unwavering human spirit, Admiral Hayes survived. And because of that survival, countless others would come to understand that even in our darkest hours, hope can arrive in the form of a single voice, calling us back to life.